this week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
Let's talk about the monk.
Let me tell you this, Benjamin.
Okay.
Today, I'm a child of peace.
For me, they're trying to fix a problem that wasn't a problem. They're trying to avoid feel-bad moments.
I'm a hero, and it sucks that my character, who is meant to be good at fighting, is being bad at fighting.
What about the bard?
The bard is in my Spangly list.
It's honestly, they're little tweaks, moving the furniture around. You know, we're making mountains out of molehills here. And then once you've got those sort of, Dael.
It's all that and more right now. There, done.
Hello.
Oh, you missed it. Oh, no.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms, second to none. My name is Ben Byrne, joined this week by Dael Kingsmill, James Hake, Shawn Merwin, and Shawn. I've probably asked this before, but I am curious with recent episodes to ask again, if you could add an entirely new class to 5e, or you could completely remake a class from the ground up, what class would you make? Doesn't even have to be for 5e. You know what? Any sort of fantasy.
Ben, I think we should make a monster hunter kind of class. I think
Really?
I think that would go over well. We should consider that.
I think you're right.
You know what? I wouldn't. I would remake the way classes are done for 5e, and I would make a system sort of like our heritage system, where you can sort of pick different elements and put them together. And by doing that, you would make the character more customizable, but you could also get rid of these pesky multiclassing rules, and you can get rid of these pesky subclasses by just allowing the combination of the different class elements to do that job.
The Skyrim method, revolutionary in video games at the time, or at least in Elder Scrolls games, where it was just like, there is no class, choose what you will. And kind of go from there. Dael, you've talked a little bit about that. Is that the route you would go as well?
I don't know. People probably saw me looking around like this, and it's just looking at objects in my space and seeing what could spark a new idea for a class, something fresh. I think I would end up just redoing the classes as they are from the ground up for a fantasy game, because I feel like over time we've really locked in on what a lot of the archetypes are. But I don't know. There's a weird old lady puppet over here. Could do a puppeteer class.
Oh, there you go.
That'd be fun. I don't know what that means, but it's got a fun name. Start from there.
There you go. Love it. James Hake, what about yourself?
If I were to make a new fantasy system, a new sort of lineup of classes, I would focus them on what kind of weapons or magic they can do. You know, no more fighter, no more sort of holy warrior, no more of these story archetypes. Dig the class down to some sort of mechanical baseline and let the story stuff fit on top of it. You know, I'd have a swordsman, a pikeman, a fire mage, a dark mage, stuff like that, an archer. And then once you've got those sort of, Dael.
What?
Well, there goes
that?
my sleep for the night.
Yeah. Holy hell. That thing is going to murder you in your sleep and drag your soul into the netherworld.
No, because I've got the gentleman here as a defense. So
yeah, I thought that was the most horrifying thing in your room.
Isn't the gentleman another wretched creature you keep in your room?
Yeah, but I know his true name, so we good. We Gucci.
There was a movie starring Anthony Hopkins called Magic that came out in the late 70s, early 80s. And it was about this ventriloquist whose puppet talks to him and makes him do bad things. And for some reason that popped into my head today. And you pulling that out right now is a combination of horrifying and just so timely. Cheers to
it's
you, Dael.
whispering to you, Shawn.
Mildred whispers in the night. All right. Back to your corner.
I feel like you didn't invent a class, Dael. It invented it through you and is like, give me life.
Oh, that's what that was.
Yeah. James, you were saying.
Oh, God. How could I?
Sorry.
Focus on mechanical brass tacks. Leave the flavor somewhere else. The one major thing I dislike about D&D's classes is the way that they are all of sort of variable levels of, flavor and mechanics. If we could strip it down to highly flavorful, highly mechanical, that's where I would start.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think if I was to do, I don't know that a lot of folks, it would be for a specific subset of people, right, who love dark fantasy. But I think if I was to design a class system for a fantasy role-playing game, it would kind of be what you've all described in different measure of like classless. Maybe this is what Symbaroum does. Somebody called that out earlier in the chat. So I apologize if I'm reinventing Symbaroum, but kind of start like pretty low level. You almost start at level 0, right? Like you are a farmer or you are a bookkeeper or something like that.
Mhm.
And then as you choose traits or feats or a skill that you can do, you kind of build your class through tech trees so that you take a little bit of magic and you kind of push into academics, and then you can learn, and then maybe that branches into like learning forbidden knowledge or learning academic kind of magic. Or you can learn how to use a sword, and then that can branch into learning how to use, or maybe it starts with like an axe, because axes are apparently easier to wield. And that branches into sword, and that branches into, polearm or whatever else. And so you kind of, you have to choose whether you're going to specialize or jack of all trades a little bit. And it's very low powered, kind of as a result to start with. But if you specialize, you get very powerful in a certain direction. And if you kind of jack of all trades it or choose 2 branches to go along, you become very dynamic in different ways. That's the way I design. Anyway, speaking of classes, let's talk about the monk. Because I want to talk about the monk. They've released another batch of videos. I didn't watch any of them. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm getting all my info from articles of people who did watch the videos. So I don't know how y'all went, but there were a couple of interesting tidbits that came to me about the monk that I thought were really interesting, especially because I think the monk is the other kind of awkward cousin of D&D classes next to the ranger in terms of it's not super popular, and it's also very divisive in terms of folks' opinions on the monk, as we've learned in the past, haven't we, Dael?
We truly have. And let me tell you this, Benjamin.
Okay.
Today, I'm a child of peace. I looked at the run sheet. I saw that the monk is also on my list, and I made the executive decision that after being so hard on the ranger, I'm just gonna not refresh myself on why I'm mad at the monk.
Okay, we'll see how long
Who
that
knows?
lasts.
Am I mad because I think it's too strong? Am I mad because I think it's too weak? Who can say? Not me.
Well, we'll get there. We'll see if we can get under your skin. James and Shawn, do you have any initial feelings towards this new monk?
Well, most of my understanding of what was changed is that they did some cultural consultancy and they moved some terms away from the monk as being sort of the kung fu Shaolin monk and into more of a general sort of mystic who fist fights, along with some monk weapons. A sort of less culturally charged warrior monk and sort of a universal warrior monk. Discipline points instead of key points, stuff like that. I think given how much controversy the monk seems to raise every time it comes up for little benefit, I think that's a fair change.
Yeah, I agree.
I played a campaign. I ran a campaign where every character was a monk. And monks were fine. Monks worked fine. The stunning got a little bit out of hand at higher levels, but if you're playing all monks, that's what you do. I like the way that they have seemed to have found some of the pain points and tweaked them positively. My question is, and we're getting this more and more now as we look at these classes that they're releasing. For me, they're trying to fix a problem that wasn't a problem. And maybe it was just not a problem for me and the people I've played with, but they're trying to avoid feel bad moments. Were there really these feel bad moments that were ruining people's fun when you would use a power, but it ended up not mattering much for that round? Just general thoughts on that?
I tend to feel like when I cast a big spell, like one of my top level spells, and it just completely whiffs, then I do feel pretty bad. Like in my game yesterday, I was playing yesterday. Yeah, I was playing a D&D game yesterday, and the evil priest we were fighting had summoned a guardian of faith, and I was like, haha, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to dispel that magic. And I rolled like a 3 on my spellcasting check, and it's like, well, that's my highest level spell slot, and I'm just going to sit here now, stuck in the aura of this guardian of faith that will kill me if I move while I'm trying to, move across the room to get to the altar. And it's just like, well, now what? It was a feel bad moment. And the game doesn't have to not have those. That was a sort of tactically it was tactically compelling, but the storytelling wasn't very interesting.
I mean, look, I'm on record as saying that I think that failure is a built-in part of the game, but I know that there's a lot of opposition to exactly what James just described, which is this idea that when you do a thing, if you don't succeed, and it just feels like a null turn, as people have called it. That's not great, particularly for a game like D&D, where you've got a party of 5 or 6 people. It can feel like it's 15 minutes to half an hour before your turn comes back again. But I also feel like there's a level, as I hear you describe that, James, I, in my head, want to be like, that's dramatic, right? Because as you start to cast the spell to unbind the magic that is pinning this guardian of faith into the mortal realm, you are overpowered by its divine virtue, and your magic fizzles in your hands as the faith of the angel is more powerful than what you're able to summon in that moment, right?
Well,
and I find that dramatic, but I also appreciate that it gets tiring trying to come up with like massively high stakes descriptions like that on every single turn of combat as the battle's kind of unfolding.
Yeah,
so what were you going to say?
Here's the thing. I don't mind failing, but I'd rather fail more dramatically than that. I would rather, I would rather say, hey, your spell goes off, but also it then lashes its scything arms into you and knocks you to 0 hit points and 1 failed death save. Right.
So it's not about the failure as much as it is that null result.
Yeah. It's like I spent a spell slot, and not only did I not do anything, the fiction didn't advance in any way.
Sure.
Because failure can be very fun. Like I feel like
I love failing. I love failing all the time.
As long as something happens.
As long as something happens. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think largely I do agree with the sort of MCDMian sort of premise of I'm a hero and it sucks that my character who is meant to be good at fighting is being bad at fighting, or, the one thing they're meant to be good at, they're sucking at right now. But I think the way that my brain frames that, it's not that I'm against when it happens in a game, when, just your turn just doesn't go off. It's when you end up with a string of it happening to one person that it really stands out. I think you get away with a long period of time as long as it's spread out between people. You don't really notice it. But when one person just has a really bad night and can't roll above an 8, oh boy, do you start to feel it. And then that player starts getting pissy and people are like, well, why are you being pissy? But it's like, of course they are. Of course, because they're having a bad night. You're having a good night, but they're not having fun. So I largely prefer it when design can avoid that. And I think part of that is making sure that failure is fun. Yeah, I don't know.
So does making Stunning Strike, even if the save is made, slow the creature and grant advantage to the next attack? Is that the solution to the problem that I brought up?
Well, here's the interesting thing. I think Stunning Strike is okay if it does nothing on a whiff, because you've got a cajillion attacks and it's pretty easy to get your key points back. It's totally okay for Stunning Strike to whiff completely. Because a Stunning Strike feels incredibly different from, a 3rd level spell slot when you're a 5th level guy.
Especially because it still does damage, right?
Yeah.
Like if they fail, it's not like a null turn entirely. That being said, like this Stunning Strike is what we're all kind of talking around here when we're talking about null results specifically for the monk. I don't know if it fixes specifically what you were saying, Shawn, but I do like the effect that it imposes. And as I think a lot of folk have talked about with stun in general, I almost wish that was the effect if they failed the save. And that's just what stun did. Or maybe like a new status called disorient or something, where it's like, half speed and the first attack against you has advantage, is just a cool way of not nullifying somebody's next turn by being stunned, but it definitely provides a cool effect that feels like they're, punch drunk for a moment. The
gamers yearn for the dazed condition. Bring back the dazed condition.
Okay, because that's what I feel. A lot of what we're seeing is we're going to give you a little boon, even though what you're trying to do didn't work. But in the long run, what that's doing is making the game longer and putting more time between your turns. So if you really don't do something, or if you really do get antsy because you want to act again, all it's doing is putting more real estate between your turns.
Yeah.
I am a child of peace.
This is an interesting thing you bring up, Ben, because I remember when 5th edition first came out and, folks like Greg Bilsland were running demos of Lost Mines of Phandelver for early streaming days. There was a lot of talk about how 5e was really fast. It was a lightning fast edition of Dungeons and Dragons, especially because we were just coming off of a somewhat clunky playtest and then the days of eternal 4th edition combats. And the reason why combat was so fast is because people didn't have a lot of options and there were a lot of binary pass-fail situations. So it's like, I attack the goblin, I miss. Well, okay, next turn. Goblin attacks you. You're dropped to 0 hit points. Oh, shoot. Anyway, I'll roll a death save, skip my next turn. It's like there's just a lot of stuff happening without a lot of things to get in the way of action and consequence. And what we've seen over the past 10 years is more and more people are playing higher level D&D where there's just a lot of options to deal with. And just like you're saying, Shawn, inserting more stuff, it increases the amount of what's the word for this? What's the technical latency? Yeah. Latency between action and consequence. And that can feel, there are times when that is good because it makes you feel like you're in control. But there are also times when, that feeling of control and agency just isn't worth it because, just like I'm talking about, the reason why I hate spending my spell slot for nothing to happen is because then I have to wait 20 more minutes for me to be able to do something.
Now that you bring that up, I'm actually starting to wonder about the psychology of it in terms of, I remember playing 4th edition, feeling like my turn came and it went lightning fast, like bam, bam, bam. Okay, I'm done now. And then feeling like every other turn dragged. Versus 5th edition, it felt like there were a lot more things that I had to figure out on my turn. Like I always had to ask a couple questions sort of at the beginning, like, okay, but what's going on with this and this and this? And I'm now just suddenly thinking, okay, so how much of that is just me feeling like my turn didn't disappear like fairy floss in the river? Because I just have more things that I have to figure out in the process. Maybe it was just amount of meat on my turn that made it seem like the other turns weren't bigger by comparison.
Well, that's what I'm kind of thinking, right? Is the psychology of turns, because games are natural. You got to take turns in a game. That's how you impose order upon it, and make it kind of function in some capacity, depending on the sort of game you're playing. And I think what, James, you've just kind of demonstrated is the inverse option that I was talking about before with a spell not working, is you make turns feel dramatic and investing, even if it's not your turn, by being invested in the story of what's happening, which has its own merits. But the opposite, kind of almost polar opposite thing is like, don't worry about the describing everything in great detail because that's going to take 10 minutes each turn. Instead, just roll and move on, and just let the turns kind of fire off quickly. Because I think while I'm not, I get uncomfortable and I get annoyed at people who kind of suggest like, you haven't decided what you're going to do on your turn yet. You need to have your dice ready and you need to roll your D20 with your damage, so it's all going as quickly as possible. I'm like, settle down, let people have fun the way they want to have fun. That being said, I think maybe some of what can slow turns down is people being like, all right, it's my turn, is it? 15, they're not really paying attention. They're not they're waiting for their turn to come around. But when it finally gets to their turn, they're kind of like, okay, well, I guess what's going on? Where's the battlefield? I've been checking my phone. I'm sure that is real.
I feel like it's changing every turn. You have to keep updating what your plan is. Anyway, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Let me continue to vent my love for Daggerheart as a system, because you only take your turn when you have something you want to do. There are many players who I have played with who, this is the wallflower player archetype, right? In many ways, I think proponents of an ordered turn system will say that this gets the wallflower out of their shell by forcing them to act, by giving them a set place where they can act. But typically, in my experience, most of the Wallflower players who I've played with, they aren't being quiet because they feel intimidated by everyone else. It does happen, but I think it's most often it's because they don't have anything particularly interesting they want to do, and so they're stuck thinking, when their turn comes around, attack. I'll do something, but it gives this impetus for some motivated action within the fiction.
Yeah, I don't know that would solve the issue that I'm talking about, right? Because what I'm talking about is people kind of being on their phones or just talking with each other or just being disengaged, which I think is what can make turns feel like they go a really long time, is because you're not really paying attention to what's happening at the table. And if you don't have a set order of turns, I'm not saying that that's better than Daggerheart's system, but I can imagine a Daggerheart player just kind of sitting back, disengaging because it's not their turn to do anything, not realizing that they have to be engaged, and then somebody being like, I don't know what we do next. Bob, do you want to do something? And Bob going, I mean, yeah, maybe I'll move around and make an attack. Can I do that?
This is
that moment in maths class where the teacher suddenly calls on the person who's been chatting up the back of the room, and they have to look at the board and try to take in what the equation is in order to answer. And there's this long pause while they're just processing information.
But that's kind of what I'm saying here, is the feeling of turns taking a long time. Is it the fault of a system? And in some cases, probably yes. Or is it psychology at the table? Is it the psychology of the players? Shawn, go ahead.
We can't control what players are going to be playing the game, but we can make sure the game for players who are engaged or who want to be engaged will be able to figure out what they're doing and resolve their turn and move on with both the game and the story and bring everyone into it. So you're absolutely right, Ben. You could have a great game that people are disengaged from because of those people. But what I am constantly, as a game designer and then as a player and GM, what I'm constantly on the lookout for is what rules are going to slow the game down, even for engaged players.
Sure.
Or especially for engaged players who, when they're playing the monk at 3rd level and they get attacked, realize that they can now not just deflect the damage, but they can reflect the damage onto some other creature. Now, I'm a 3rd level monk and I'm playing with 3rd level players, and we're fighting a troll who's CR5, I think. All right, it's a standard combat, right? And the troll comes up and he attacks me, the monk. And I'm 3rd level now, so I could absorb this damage. Should I absorb it? Should I absorb it now? It's a reaction. Should I absorb it? Well, wait, it gets 3 attacks. So why don't you wait and see if the next attack hits, because that does more damage? Should I, right? That is, now I can deflect the damage. Can I deflect it against the orc who's, right? Now we're discussing all of these tactical things, which if you want a highly tactical game, great. You have now engaged everyone. If you want to keep the story moving along apace, though, now it becomes all of this going on during one single turn that's not even the player's turn. And that's what I'm worried about when I see new rules like this coming into effect. With the rogue, it was just, all right, I'll use my reaction, I'll take half damage. Great, done. This deflection, reflection thing, whew. Dael, what is it? A child of peace?
I am a child of peace.
Could you send some of that my way?
Peace, peace, peace.
I think incredibly salient, and it's because I like what they're trying to do with the monk here. I like the increased damage on unarmed strikes. As a pre-5th level monk, I felt incredibly underpowered in some fights when it came to, I'm doing here's my D6 and here's my D4 if they both hit, while the hunter ranger is doing 2d8 plus whatever, plus a D6, on their damage on their attack. Anyway, that is anecdotal, but nevertheless. And I did like the ability to not just deflect missiles, but kind of avoid damage, because it felt like they were changing the monk into a tank but in a different way to how the barbarian and how a fighter or a paladin might tank. It's not that you can't be hit, and it's not that you can take a lot of damage. It's just that you can kind of move it around. Yeah, exactly. That's how it feels, right? And that's how they're going for it.
Was an alien monk.
Bleep bloop blop bloop bleep bloop bloop. Yeah. But I think you're right, Shawn. Now that as soon as you've said that, I had a flashback to every time I've hit a rogue and they've decided whether they're going to uncanny dodge it or not, you know?
And it's not in and of itself terrible if that's the game that you and your players want to play. But we just got a comment in chat here from Richard Marriott Smith. What's really discussed is the fact that the DM and their skill makes or breaks a game. Rules can only do so much. Yes, that is very true, but the rules can do too much, because no matter how good a DM you are, when you run into that situation where you go up and you attack this character, and then there's this big discussion going on, that is out of your hands at that point. Can you help? Can you try to gently nudge things along? Yes. But if you have that group of players who have to discuss every single tactical thing that could happen ad infinitum, you're sort of trapped as the DM at that point. So the rules do make a big difference in these cases, regardless of your skill as a game master.
I think the same is true in terms of psychology of the group as well. If the group just aren't engaged, or they're engaged in different ways, and you're having those the Bob up the back of the class who's not listening, you're kind of fighting uphill to keep everybody engaged at the table if they're just choosing not to be. But I like the way of the warrior of the elements. I think that's cool. They've
Big
kind
improvement.
They've taken some of the solar monk from Xanathar's and they've wrapped it in here, and it feels like I'm punching dudes with air and lightning and stuff.
And it did need that, because 2014 PHB Way of the Elements, that was in the PHB, right?
Yes.
I'm not crazy. Okay, great. It really did just feel like a cheat method of giving spells to your mage. Like, it didn't feel like it was its own thing. It was like subclass gives you access to XYZ spells, and I always felt underwhelmed by that thematically. We said something nice. Peas.
I like the damage increase on unarmed strikes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't like that unarmed strikes can now grapple and shove. That feels exactly like what you're saying, Shawn. It's like, is it better to grapple here? Then I can drag him over here.
I do in premise like that, because I feel like that feels more monkey to me. And it feels like it engages another aspect of the game that has been existent but not used. But it absolutely does do the thing that we were just complaining about.
Well, and that's the monk. What about the bard? Do we feel strongly about the bard one way or the other?
The bard is in my Spangly list. I really liked the bard. I also didn't reread the bard, so I don't know why, but I clearly really liked it. It's also very near the beginning of the class list, so it's very possible I was just in a better mood when I read it. Let's be honest. But barbarian's in Meh. So bard being in Spangly, I think is true.
What do you like about the bard, Shawn?
I like that they did the bardic inspiration in a new way, because people sort of wanted to do it that way anyway. And it does make the game faster rather than slower. You have a bardic inspiration. Don't worry about this 10-minute deal. Just keep it until you use it. Use it, after this roll, rather than trying to figure out right? Just say, oh, I missed. Okay, I'll add this. Boom. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Makes the game quicker.
It feels better to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat rather than, waste your little Benny. I like bards.
Did you have any? You like bards? Do you like this bard?
I don't have very strong feelings about these changes to the classes. Honestly, they're little tweaks, moving the furniture around. We're making mountains out of molehills here because it's good radio.
That's what you say. I'm making mountains out of molehills because it's what I do, baby.
Well, maybe I'm the one making molehills out of mountains. I don't know. They're fine. I like it.
Look, I'm going to be honest. As we fire through the rest of these, the Sorcerer and the Cleric, I don't have strong feelings on any of them aside from the Monk.
I don't have strong feelings about the Cleric or the Sorcerer. I did really like the Bard. I like the new subclass, even though the new the dance subclass for the Bard Ben, that was great.
Yeah, that
I
was
love
good.
that for you.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been a long time coming. It's something that, they open with being like, yeah, the bard can be kind of any kind of creative occupation, but then it doesn't, have much backup for it. So it's nice getting
the bard of miniature painting. That I'm gonna make that subclass now. Shawn, we're putting it in Grim Hollow.
Awesome. Awesome.
Follow through, you coward. But, I feel like dance was one that I was kind of eager to see how it would be implemented, and I liked how it was implemented. Hold it up next to the monk and we might have some problems, but but I think it's really cool. And I do also, I'm very aware, because I was saying this to Ben after the show last week. It was very unfair of me a couple of weeks ago when I was saying during the Unearthed Arcana, they should have been swinging for the fences, because they did do that and I complained about it. So let's remember for a moment that there was a while where the new bard was just going to be kind of a healer. Do we remember that? Where they were like...
yes.
That was definitely my impression of the Unearthed Arcana bard that they released a while back, that it was kind of a little heal bot. It wasn't as effective at healing as the cleric, but it was going to be... I don't know, it was a weird phase of time. And so this felt like a reemergence into where the bard belongs. There are colors in my life again. It's good.
Sorcerer does rage, but magic.
It's a weird decision.
I like the idea of like going Super Saiyan, but it is like in terms of them defining the sorcerer's identity away from the wizard. I'm like, I don't think this does that more than like sorcery points or meta magic. It's just another thing the sorcerer can kind of do.
It's a little alt state. I feel like if you really reached every single one of the classes could have a little alt state like that. You give the monk, peerless focus. You give the fighter a battle trance, and you could give the wizard a sort of spellbook unity where they become one with their pages. And it's like, there's nothing particularly materially thematic about this. I like it. I love these transformation states. I love the paladin transformation at level 20. I think, I would like to rage when Travis in Critical Role wants to go into a rage. It's a great moment. It's just a little button you press that does a cool moment. And I love having that. I don't know. Again, it seems like mountains are being made out of molehills. Like, this is a fine feature. It's okay.
I would complain, but I did this with the wizard already for Kobold Press's Dragon Magic. I made a dragon subclass, Dragon Caster, so where he basically goes into a rage and can do funky things with magic while in that state. So, yay, good job.
Mm-hmm.
I love it because I can't say I don't.
Because you're a child of peace.
Thank you. I am.
Speaking of children of peace, the cleric, I do have a major issue with the cleric, and I don't know if this is how it's going to work, but because I haven't read it in detail. Trickery Domain, their illusionary duplicate no longer being concentration. I have a player who I used to play with who's gonna love that, because we had a huge debate over whether that feature should be concentration or not. And I was like, you know what? Let's try it out. Let's do a session where you don't need concentration for it. And he was like, great. And then he cast his illusionary duplicate, and then he cast Spirit Guardians, because you can cast spells from the duplicate, and went and hid around a corner while he sent this blender into the middle of the battlefield, this functionally immortal blender that you can't do anything about because it doesn't have hit points. So the only way to get rid of it is to dispel it. And I don't even think you can do that because it's not a spell. And he still had actions free to cast cantrips and other spells from around the corner that he was kind of hiding around. So I don't know if that combo is going to be necessarily applicable. It sounds like it's going to be applicable.
Maybe Jeremy
I like
Crawford,
that it's a bonus action.
Maybe Jeremy Crawford decided to take more inspiration from Baldur's Gate 3 and make the illusory duplicate attackable.
Oh, maybe.
Jeremy has so far loved to talk about the things that he's taken inspiration from BG3. And so, who can say?
I do also, it is funny after complaining about the Ranger for 2 weeks running and the Ranger not getting Hunter's Mark without concentration than this.
But you're a child of peace, Dael.
I'm a child of peace.
We appreciate that. All the monsters now have blind sight or true sight now. It's strange how that works. being able to see your illusionary double and see you. It just happens. Just to go back to the Sorcerer for a second, this has nothing to do with the Sorcerer really, except when they talked about being able to do meta magic in different ways and Twin Spell was given as a reference. I was like, oh, let's see what they say about Twin Spell. It's like, now you can Twin Spell these other spells, like Banishment. I'm like, no! Dude, if you're going to use an example, don't use Banishment. Don't use these things that game masters absolutely hate. They ruin the game. Oh, good. You can cast more Banishment. That's what I need. If I wasn't a child of peace, I would be angry right now.
Yes. Well, those are unless anybody's got anything else, those are the classes, the updates that we've gotten for the new books. Cool. Speaking of Wizards of the Coast, we've got a bit of breaking news coming in from the second best tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms, Mastering Dungeons. It is, as far as I'm aware, been confirmed. Kyle Brink is no longer with Wizards of the Coast. Shawn, do you want to illuminate us with any details you may have about this?
No, that pretty much sums it up.
All right, cool.
Teos reached out to Wizards with a list of questions. And one of the questions was, we've been hearing a lot from everyone except from Kyle, and his LinkedIn profile had said that there was an end date for his time as the director of D&D there. So Teos asked, and they said, yes, he is no longer with the company, and that's the news.
I love that we are always like, wow, Mastering Dungeons always has actual news and we have to poach from them. Why is it like this? And then it's like, well, Teos reached out to Wizards and asked them
research.
questions.
We are merely the carrion birds feasting on Teos's kills.
Yeah. And if you want another bit of news that we broke earlier, well, we recorded earlier, I think our show comes out like a millisecond before this, so he also asked about Dan Rawson, who was vice president of D&D. Still is, and also has taken on another part of the company, which was Hasbro Pulse, which is their crowdfunding platform. So he is also going to be in charge of that and looking for ways to use that to, I forgot what their quote was. It was something like to check for collectible opportunities in the D&D sphere or something of that nature. So if that's breaking news, Dan Rawson's still there and also doing other things.
Yeah, it seems like I found an article from 2 days ago that was saying there was a little bit of a shuffle around with Dan Rawson moving into a new role. And I think there'd been 1 or 2 new hires as well into the Hasbro team, which was funny because I had a run sheet from episode, I think it was 54 of this podcast, where we talked about Dan Rawson being hired, which would have been about 2 years ago now. So congratulations. Interesting to see how they will continue to maneuver around.
Did we report on Justice Arman and his promotion?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. While we're on the news of that, it was a couple of weeks ago now, Justice Arman, who a designer who was hired a couple of years ago at Wizards and has been doing a lot on the books that have come out recently. I don't know the exact title, but it looks like he was promoted to sort of like head of design. So maybe the person who is over top of the other designers and helping with their transition. So
no, very much congratulations on that.
I'm really happy to see Justice getting his flowers. He's doing good work. I'm happy he survived the layoffs over there at Wizards because it would kill me.
Speaking of monks who do a million things on their turn, Justice.
There you
go. Well, speaking of, I don't know, Shawn. I'm just going to let that one go. Do you? You strike me as the sort of person who sends a lot of letters. Is that fair to say?
For you, Ben, absolutely.
Great.
I'd sent 4 already today.
Really?
As far as you know, yes.
Well, you need stamps for those letters, if I'm not mistaken.
It is true. Why do you bring this up now? Ben, this is a strange time to bring up letter sending and stamps.
Yeah, I suppose any time after like 2006 is a weird time to bring up letter sending and stamps. But if you lived in the UK, which I know you don't, but nevertheless, the UK Royal Mail Service is celebrating 50 years of D&D with monster and character themed stamps that you can put on real letters.
Well, that's amazing, and I'm going to move to the UK just to do that.
Maybe hope for a letter from the UK. Come on, Martin, our graphic designer, send us a letter using a D&D stamp.
I feel guilty because I found the other day buried amongst various junk emails. Look, my inbox is not neat. We don't need to talk about it, but I found buried amongst other things a thing saying, "Hey, do you want some of the stamps from the UK?" And I remember looking at it and going, "Can I use stamps from the UK?" And then not remembering to go back to it. But I could have had the UK D&D stamps.
You could have been showing it to us right now.
Could have been a contender.
Yeah, I don't know if foreign stamps really. I mean, I assume you can use stamps to send things overseas, and then there would be foreign stamps in your country from another nation that got sent to you. But I don't know if you can send internal mail. Who knows? Anyway, the artwork on them is actually, look, I'm not going to lie, it is cool. The artist, Wayne Reynolds, who you may know, I recognized his art instantly from Pathfinder, actually, from the Red Dragon in Pathfinder. Very angular, very strong line art that I think is very cool, very specific, very evocative. So if you like Wayne Reynolds' art, pick up some stamps.
His art's on the cover of the 4th edition Player's Handbook, and it's on and it's within a lot of old 3rd edition stuff too. Wayne Reynolds, iconic for the whole sort of, aughts to tens era of D&D. It's really cool to see him back in the saddle.
And the US will have D&D stamps too.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Actually, we were hunting for Wayne Reynolds. He's also really? In the 2014 Player's Handbook. He's got a wizard roasting someone, and he's got Mordenkainen's Blade, or whatever it's called. Anyway, there's your Wayne Reynolds trivia.
There you go.
Well, looking forward to the US stamps, and I'll just have to draw a dragon on my mail, I guess, myself.
I value this drawing of a dragon at 8 cents.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of things that I could do myself, streaming, but I'm not doing it alone because you three are here. But if I wanted to do it also independent of the Lorecast, I would also not be doing it alone if I was using Moonbeam.
Okay, we get there. Okay.
Yeah, we got it. We landed. We landed on the moon.
Woo!
With Moonbeam. Moonbeam is if folks don't know, a new streaming service that aims to revolutionize live streaming, angling itself sort of as a Twitch competitor or other. Look, I don't know other streaming services apart from Twitch and now Moonbeam, so sue me. I'm sure there's others out there. But this is cool. This is a cool idea. I got to speak a couple of weeks ago with Anthony Joyce Rivera about this, who is one of the founders behind Moonbeam. And it seems like a cool project. Does anybody else know? I'm just getting sick of the sound of my own voice.
I've heard whispers on the wind, but I don't know any more than you do. But I am interested in it because wait. We gotta pull up the say your beat sheet of like what is included because
all right,
didn't pull it up.
Dael, when you're streaming, you know how Twitch incentivizes you to be like on all the time, right? And you're tired. You don't want to be on streaming constantly. It's exhausting. The pennies that Twitch kind of throws at you. I'm saying this as we're streaming from Twitch. Hello, everyone.
We lost the
Please
feed.
don't pull the plug. Yeah. That's all right. We'll be able to stream to Moonbeam with many others because the idea is, I think this is cool. Basically, algorithm exhaustion, I kind of call it, or burnout, particularly for YouTube creators as well. The algorithm does not care about your annual leave. You have to be putting out videos constantly if you want to remain kind of relevant without your numbers kind of dropping in terms of views,
particularly
subscribers.
For streaming services
exactly.
like Twitch. It really is live and die by being alive.
Yeah. Moonbeam kind of angles to change this, make it more of a team effort by creating what are referred to as realms. Anybody can create a realm, I believe, but a realm, it's kind of functions like a YouTube channel or a Twitch channel, but you can invite other people to stream on your realm so that you don't, and your realm can grow and your community can grow. Realms are kind of like online communities without you feeling like you need to be online personally, constantly to grow that realm. So it becomes almost more like a community space or a community channel that you can, as I said, invite other people to stream on, which is cool. It kind of alleviates some of that anxiety around keeping up with the output requirements of a platform. Anybody who's streaming as well can earn donations from the audience who have Moonstones. Thank you. Moonstones donated to the streamer. The streamer can then decide what the breakdown is of revenue. So if they're just streaming on their own, they can claim 100% of the revenue donated to them, and that's totally fine. They can choose to break the revenue up and say, all right, I'm going to take whatever percentage, 75%, and 25% is going to go to this person who's helping me also do this stream. Or maybe they split it 50-50. They have complete control over it. They can also split the revenue with their realm if they want to, but they're not required to. So it's kind of up to the realms and the streamers to decide how they want to structure it for themselves. How does that
But it's deliberately built to be community is kind of what the crux of a lot of that is, and where its difference lies with other streaming platforms. And I do think that it's really interesting from the perspective of, at the moment, partly because of that sort of, we're all chained to the algorithm, there is a real difficulty in getting started in something like streaming right now, and breaking into YouTube as well. There's a real difficulty leaping in and starting at this point versus getting in on the ground early, particularly because Twitch has never really been able to fix this problem it has with discoverability. You really are kind of reliant on audiences elsewhere for the most part to be discovered on Twitch. There are systems in place like raids that do a little bit to help, but largely, analytics have shown that you don't tend to find someone on Twitch randomly and then follow them. You tend to come to them from Twitter or from somewhere else. Sure. And so there's kind of this real difficulty in building up a community, building up an audience in that way. And then YouTube, on the other end, has way better discoverability, but it's been trying to kind of wage this war. It's basically trying to usurp the position of Twitch at the same time as it's trying to usurp the position of TikTok. And it started out really strong on its streaming game, but then kind of gave up on these quality of life improvements as it started focusing on the sort of the shorts element of what they're doing, trying to compete with TikTok, trying to compete with Instagram Reels. And I think largely they are being very successful with that. So they're really focusing on that right now and letting their streaming sort of subset fall to the wayside a little bit. So then having another sort of competitor come into the field who has way less behind them. They're not going to be, they aren't heavyweights of this, kind of online entertainment mill that exists. But what they do have going for them is that they are deliberately structuring it in a way that is meant to make things easier for people who are just beginning. You can get your little community of people together and start working together to build something. You can, make these decisions regarding revenue split from the get-go, which is a huge deal compared to Twitch and YouTube. And those elements, I think, are going to be really attractive to a lot of people. It's going to be a matter of how far beyond our own kind of community we can get that word spread. But I think that is sort of there's a little David and Goliath element to it where it's like that is a pretty solid sling to start using against these kind of giants of the streaming industry. So I'm kind of excited to see
their YouTube trailer definitely kind of pits that David and Goliath vibe to it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, Anthony gave me a preview of some of its functions before its crowdfunding began. This was several months ago. Ben, does the list of features you've been given talk about its automated chat filtration at all?
That's what I was going to jump onto next.
Because that's the part that Anthony showed me that really caught my eye. This is one of the rare instances where I really will go to bat for AI, because rather than being generative, it's curative. It is a curator role for this artificial intelligence, because it will take a look at incoming chat messages and group them into buckets, basically, that not only serve a moderation function, but also sort of a statistical function as to how your audience is responding to certain types of broadcast that you're sending out there, or certain topics.
It's very clever, as Anthony was showing me. It's not just a filter of because the YouTube filter that you can set, the one on Ghostfire, I didn't set it up. It was set up before my time, but it is really strict. And so a lot of the time, I get a lot of filtered comments that are just something like, when my half-elf killed the orc, I got a crit and it was fun, just because of the word killed was kind of in there. I believe it's got a name.
Pixis?
Pixis. Thank you, Shawn. Yeah. Pixis is intelligent in a way that it can tell the difference. The example Anthony showed me, I assume he might have shown others as well, was he typed into it, Ben is shit. I'm sorry, Dante. And then he typed into it, Ben is the shit. And it could kind of tell the difference between an insult and a compliment, which was cool. But it's also worth noting that while this is I believe I'm accurate in saying it's like a language model kind of learning technology, they haven't done any scraping. They're not pulling up from any large language model or anything like that. They're generating it themselves through their own chat. They're kind of committed to ethical use of such technology. And so it learns as people will interact with Moonbeam, the service. It also doesn't generate art or anything like that. Yeah, go ahead, Dael.
I was just going to say, one of the other things that makes this really exciting is that Anthony is someone who really knows what he's talking about, knows what he's doing. And it's just cool seeing that kind of background and depth of knowledge being applied creatively and, socially, for lack of a better word. I don't know. I'm excited for them. I'm excited.
Yeah, there's a whole team as well. It's worth noting. Anthony, obviously, he's been on the Lorecast before, friend of the show, but he has a whole team behind him as well, helping to bring this vision of theirs to life. So it is crowdfunding right now. It's already reached its goal, but you can go find it on BackerKit if you want to go check it out, find more info, search it on YouTube. It is called Moonbeam. It is currently, it's just one last thing I thought was worth noting. A lot of tabletop RPG companies are kind of supporting it right now and making their realms and trying to get content on there, but it is not a tabletop only streaming service. It is open to anybody who wants to stream anything. So if you've got ideas, it is open to you in theory as well. I don't know if just anybody can go create a realm yet because they're still developing the platform. But like I say, go check it out on BackerKit if you want to learn more. Now, Shawn, if you wanted to send an email to this podcast specifically, where would you send that?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
You won't even need a D&D specific stamp. You can just send it by hitting send.
But if you want to add a little drawing of a dragon
as an attachment,
we wouldn't be upset about it.
Speaking of attachments, we got an email from Mike from Perth, which is in Western Australia on the other side of the continent.
So he's the one?
He's the one. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Mike sent an email. There's no real question attached to it, just kind of giving general appreciation for the Lorecast, the mix of content, comedy, and drama from the tabletop RPG industry. So we appreciate that email. The reason I also bring this up is because living in Perth, he spotted a car with a number plate. I'm not going to say the exact number plate because you could probably track people down through their number plates, but it looks a lot like somebody has Ghostfire Gaming as their car number plate, which is very amusing. It could be anything. It's actually, no one from the company lives in Perth, so it's nobody's number plate that we know of. But if it is an ode to Ghostfire, thank you to that person as well.
And for those of you who don't speak Australian, he's talking about a license plate, folks.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Ironically, this number plate has no numbers on it.
He's sort of making a riddle for people to track down this unrelated man.
Yeah. He's like, what? No, it stands for this instead. Last but not least, Styx sent in an email asking if we know any good sci-fi RPGs that could be good for replicating something like Legends of the Galactic Heroes type vibes, which I believe is an anime. Looking for kind of space war type situations, not Star War type situations, space war, but more importantly, kind of the planning, the tactics, the leadership, the real lives of rulers and civilians, the drama. I thought I've never played these before, but I thought maybe Star Trek, I believe, has an RPG that could kind of tie into this. It sounded like he was describing Star Trek to me, or possibly Dune has just popped into my head. But James, you're the resident Lancer expert, if not sci-fi RPG expert. What do you recommend?
Well, I gotta say, so Legend of the Galactic Heroes is one of those sort of venerable shows that often shows up on these classic best of lists. And it's been on my to-watch list for a very long time. It's got this enormous cast, very political drama in a sci-fi setting. People often talk about the realism of its space combat, though I can't speak much to that because it's very hard to do space combat realistically. Usually it happens at engagement distances too far to comprehend. But there's a sense of it's sort of a dark fantasy sci-fi thing going on. And to that, I would say something like Traveler, maybe something maybe too gritty for its own good. The sort of system where you can die in character creation. That sounds about right to me.
Roman also recommending the Expanse tabletop RPG when you said space combat realistic.
How did I not know the Expanse
is what
had
I
a
thought
TTRPG?
of. Everything's got a TTRPG.
That's true. I should have been paying more attention to the everythingness of having TTRPGs.
And never sleep on Espergenesis. It's a 5e TTRPG, so if 5th edition scratches that itch for you, but you want to take it into space, check out Espergenesis.
I do like Espergenesis a lot. I covered it back when I was doing stuff at D&D Beyond, and it's real good.
And also just never sleep.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's like, is that the name of an RPG?
It is now.
It's just advice for life. Cool. All right. Well, speaking of never sleeping, it is not early morning, but it's morning here. So I'm not going to go to sleep because I've got the rest of a day to do. So I'm going to go. See yous. Walk out of frame. All right. I should close this podcast.
Imagine if you did. Imagine if you just left.
That would be amazing. I should do that one day. All right. This has been the Eldritch Lorecast. You can catch us 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific on Twitch on a Monday if you want to find us live, or it's 9 a.m. Tuesday for Australia time. Just note for folks, we will be here streaming next week, but the week after that, we won't be streaming because we will be flying to Gen Con. So we might have a 2-week gap after next week. I'll mention it again next week, but just for Twitch folks to know. I've been Ben Byrne here with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, and James Hake. We'd all really appreciate it if you liked the episode, if you're listening on YouTube, stars and things. I'm bad at the call outs, so I'm just going to get out of here. Goodbye!
Ooh, there's an extra little ba-ba-da-ba-ba in there. I really like that.
Throw one of those in there.
Always devolves into jazz.
Don't take us offline.
For the love of all the soul.
Bibbidi-baz.
Skibbity boop bop bop.